Hey, 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 I'm Michelle.
And I'm Greta.
We are girlfriends who have always been seekers. We love learning, sharing, and most of all, we love having those soul-to-soul moments with our girlfriends.
Our podcast is about spiritual connection and sisterhood. You are not alone. So grab your glass, get comfy, and join us as we make some noise, light up the room, and
get into it. Hey there. So happy you're here. But I wanted to give you just a little heads up. Today's episode does contain some discussion that can be pretty heavy. We are getting into some sensitive topics, and we understand that it can be somewhat triggering or just, something that you're not in a place to hear at this present moment. And that's totally cool. So if that's the case, go ahead and just hit pause, bookmark this for another time, and have a fantastic day. I am super thrilled to announce my guest today, and that's for many different reasons, and you'll understand what I'm talking about as she starts to tell her story. But my dear friend Tenile from high school is here, and we were just talking a little bit before we hit record about how years ago she had asked me to speak at her church about grief, and I did. And we had these just really deep, rich conversations together. And now here we are, and I'm asking her to speak with us. And also before she came, Greta and I were playing with our book ceremony, and we opened up to a page. And I want to read this because I'm going to ask Tenile to answer this question, and it may not be just right after I ask it, but through her story, I think the answer to this is going to be revealed. So the question is, if you woke up tomorrow completely healed, who would you be? So with that, kicking it off, Tenile, can you introduce yourself and then just kind of give us your story? Let's just get right into it.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me here. You guys are just beautiful people, and it is a privilege and an honor to be here just to participate in what you guys are doing and the difference you are hoping to make in the lives of your listeners. So hand clap to both of you. I think it's wonderful. Yeah, so I'm 45 years old, a mom of 3, married for the second time to a wonderful man. We've been married going on 15 years now. I am a working mom. I also participate in ministry. So my life is very full now. Getting into who I am, I think requires I share a little bit of where I've been.
Absolutely.
And my story has been a very complicated one. I was at a very young age victimized. I was a victim of molestation. I also had to suffer through the addiction of both of my parents. I came from a very dysfunctional family in a very unique environment where I did not have positive role models or individuals to show me anything different than what had been modeled through those that were suffering through their own trauma, their own challenges. So I grew up in a very unique situation where I really was led on this journey to discover who I was in the midst of all of this, what I considered at the time chaos. Being a young girl, enduring molestation, and having the really lasting effect of that kind of show up throughout my life from that point of my story has been a challenge. It's been a challenge just to show up and to discover who I am in spite of that.
How old were you when you were molested?
I was molested from the ages of 8 to about 10 before I found the courage to tell someone. I was molested by a family member, someone who, in my mind as a young girl, had great power and influence over the family, which added to the shame and the embarrassment of it. I think it's important to add that I'm biracial. So my dad is African American, my mother is Caucasian. I don't know how these two worlds collided, but they could not be more opposite. My mother's family was from Virginia, very rooted in racism. We were the first grandchildren of color in that family. So it was not uncommon for me to be amongst my blonde-haired, blue-eyed cousins and hear the N-word dropped from my grandmother, from my grandfather, from my aunts, from my uncles. I remember growing up not understanding what that was, but having it thrown out frequently to the point that it made me extremely curious, so that I went back to my dad and asked what it was. And I learned that it was a very derogatory word directed toward people of African American descent. So to paint a picture of what it looked like, I could be in the living room with my family members and those N words, that N word, but not you. So that was very confusing growing up, because already I'm in the midst of my trauma of abuse. I am completely different from everything around me in that environment. I do not look anything like any of my cousins. And then I took on this mindset that the reason I had been chosen to be molested was because I was the one that stood out.
You were different.
I was different. And I took that as a flaw, as a negative, because of the negativity in my mind that it brought into my life, into my world, because of the abuse I suffered. So I attached being different, standing out, to hurt, pain, mistreatment, abuse. So I had to navigate through all of that. And it took me years. I'm 45 and still doing the work.
Well, the damage that that would have on your self-esteem at such a young age, when you're trying to just even figure out who you are and define yourself, you're being told such negative things about yourself and shown negative things, having negative things happen to you. It's like, how do you even get through that to find this incredible woman that I'm looking at today? I mean, you are just full of confidence and you have this beautiful, calming energy and you seem so centered. You are so centered because I can feel it from you. And so I just think it's remarkable that you overcame that and you continue to grow.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. For me, it was having to draw from within and not even knowing what was within, but knowing that the help was not coming from outside of myself. My parents around that same time fell into addiction. It was the crack era. And I recognize now, looking back, that that was their way of dealing with their own trauma.
Sure.
I think about what it must have been like for my mom to grow up in that environment, right? To be disowned at 17 because you had a child with a Black person. The ridicule that she must have had to endure in that space. But she was so strong and found herself in this space where she became addicted to what she had hoped would be a release from what she was dealing with in her life.
Yeah, I have a father who succumbed to addiction, and that is a very familiar experience for me too, to have gone full circle. And it is wonderful when you can find that empathy for them through all of the pain that you experienced, not having your parents be there for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, looking back, it is what God desired to use to give me the strength to do the work, to learn how to love myself. I remember being very young and being very angry with my mother because my abuse was related to my mom's side of the family, and not being able to have her because she was addicted herself and she was not available to me at that age where you're already in so much turmoil. You're being mistreated, you're being abused, you're looking for help. Inside, I was screaming like, somebody save me, but nobody was coming. So it's like, you have a choice. Are you going to drown, or are you going to learn how to swim and reposition yourself? So for me, even at that very young age, I can remember taking on this mindset of nobody is coming to save you. They can't. And recognizing in that space that I would have to rely on something inward and believe in something outwardly that was greater than me to kind of guide me, because I'm just a kid. I don't know the ins and outs of life, right? All I know is what I see, and there's nothing positive in what I see.
So let me ask you this, because I know that you're a God-loving woman and you do a lot in ministry. Were you exposed to God or religion through family, or when did that come into your life?
Yeah. So I love this story. I was in elementary school, and across from that school was a church. And behind the church, an apartment complex of a girl that I ultimately befriended, second grade. And so one day I decided I was going to go play at her house. I saw this big banner on the gate. It said Vacation Bible School for Kids, and there was all this fun looking stuff on it. And right there in that moment, me and Margarita, which was the friend I was going to play with, said, I wonder what that is, because that looks like fun. And we both decided we're going to check it out. So we joined the church. Very interesting, because the church ended up being a very strict, it was a Pentecostal apostolic church. So they have a lot of rules set in place. If you're a woman, you can't wear makeup, you can't cut your hair, you can't wear jewelry, you cannot wear pants, you cannot watch TV, you cannot listen to secular music. There were all these things.
So if you walked in today, they're like, no, you cannot come into this space.
Yeah. They're going to welcome you in, but they're going to transition you into their belief system, right? So I look back now and I laugh, because I'm like, geez, God, you went from 0 to 100. But I remember walking in there, and even in spite of all the rules and all of the things that were very challenging to acclimate to, I had a real spiritual experience through that. I really came to know that God was real through that church, because all of the things that would normally be distractions were stripped away. And all you had was that moment to hear what you believed was a spiritual word, spiritual direction. And then you had this liberty to just receive it in the fullness of whatever that was. So I am so grateful to that experience, because for me, I experienced for the first time that there was an outward power source for me to tap into, that God was real, that I could cry and let it out, that I could feel the presence of something greater embrace me and somehow let me know it was going to be okay.
Well, even that curiosity that you had, it's like that was totally God-led, right? How is it that here I am at school and there's this church right here? You didn't have to travel to it. It was something that was visible to you. And you had a friend that was willing to go on that, whether you decided together, however that conversation went. But to step into that, to me, that is God already working through you, leading you.
100%. I always say God is a master strategist. Nothing just happens. A lot of times we have to get a little further into our journey to be able to look back and reflect and tie things in together. I know without a doubt that God knew I was in a moment of desperation at that point, and I was looking in every direction for help that I, in my mind and in my heart, solidified was not coming. I was desperate. I was in so much pain as a child, smiling, laughing, joking as I always was, but hurting inside so much, crying out to something that I didn't even know existed, right? For myself. I heard of God, all of that, but I didn't know God for myself. So looking back, I'm like, he's so strategic. It was the banner. It was the friend. It was just all these little pieces of the puzzle that God put into place. And I had no clue that it was God. But in hindsight, I see where he was strategizing. How do I get her from this wounded state of existence to who I purposed her to be when I thought about her, when I began to imagine what she would be, who she would be, the lives she would touch. It chokes me up even now, because I think about how much God loved me, in the sense that in spite of whatever I experienced, he still put these pavers in place to allow me to step into who I was going to become.
Because that's also not everyone's story.
Right.
One thing we don't have in this room is tissue. But we're all like happy to do a little bit of this. So if all of our mascara is running, we're good.
You came here with these gifts, being able to connect with people and be on a big platform and have the bravery to share your story. You could have easily become the victim as a child, as a scared little child with no support around you. It's amazing and unbelievable to many of us who haven't experienced a childhood like that to think that you could even come through that. But I believe it was part of your destiny. And you luckily did not play the victim, and you saw that banner and you found your path.
Yes, because I'm sitting here thinking you've got super hurtful things being thrown at you. You've got molestation going on, abuse. You've got parents who succumb to their addiction. One person can take one piece of that and already have such a huge story to share. And so, how amazing that you've been able to break that cycle and provide a whole different life and a whole different narrative for your children. Who knows what our children's paths are going to look like, but those things already happened to you so young. And so the lens that you have in terms of being a mother, what that looks like even for them, it's so powerful.
Yeah, I think how I show up to them as a mom 100% is impacted by my own journey. I realized how important it is to instill in my daughters. I have 2 daughters and 1 son. How important it is to instill in them the truth that we are all on a journey, right? And that journey is supposed to serve a purpose that is greater than ourselves. The purpose is outside of us, but we utilize what is inside of us to fulfill that outward purpose. My experience has taught me to really pour into my daughters and let them know that they are fully capable of confronting anything that life presents them because they've been gifted. They've been fully equipped. One may have to climb this mountain. One may have to climb this mountain, and the mountains may require different equipment. But whatever it is, God, for me, I believe it's God, has already empowered them and fully equipped them to climb that mountain at their own pace and to take in the process. I think that is really, really, really impactful, is to understand that anytime you're just in life in general, but anytime you're trying to overcome something, you have to afford yourself grace and patience. And you have to really be kind and loving to yourself because it's a process. I didn't wake up one day and go, oh, I don't want to feel so low and have so low self-esteem today. It was a process of recognizing, one, that I was suffering from low self-esteem and why, and being able to sit with that and understand that a lot of what I was feeling was because of what I had experienced, and being able to love myself enough to know that I can separate what I've experienced from who I am.
Ooh, that's big. One more time on that. So you can separate what you experienced from who you are.
Correct.
That does not have to
Yes.
be the same.
Yes, you are not the abuse that happened to you. You are just this gift, this incredible gift that I believe God entrusted you with being able to endure some of those struggles so that you could help others.
Yeah, there's a beautiful scripture that I actually had hanging in my home for many, many years. I just took it down recently. And it's Romans 8:28. It says, for we know that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. I did not see the purpose clearly. I could not find myself in that purpose because I was blinded by pain and disappointment. I loved what you said because it's truth. It's my truth. I understand now in hindsight that I'm not the only woman to ever be molested. I'm not the only woman to suffer through the addiction of loved ones and the impact that that had on her life. I'm not the only woman to have to deal with, trauma and dysfunction, right, in family. But what I am is a woman who has walked that path, who can stand before anyone and say that you have what you need in you to take that next step. And for me, I had to recognize, and I think this is so important for anyone that I'm blessed to just come in contact with to understand, that we have a choice. We can carry the bag of our trauma, our pain, and we can go down the victim vortex and remain there, right? We can just go through life as a victim. Or we can say, even though this was super painful, even though this traumatized my life for years, even though this has been the hardest thing for me to work my way through, I can find a way to take it and make something good out of it. And for me, just sharing my story, I have seen this help women who have been holding this as a secret, but dealing with the impact of it, right? Angry all the time, from this relationship to the next one, feeling not good enough, self-hate, self-harm,
Drinking,
Drug abuse.
drugs, all of these ways that
Sex.
this shows up. Sex, yes.
Yeah.
It comes up because they're holding it, because there's so much shame, there's so much pain. I don't want people to know my business. But for me, it was like, I'm going to take away the power of that thing. And I'm going to take control of that. And I'm going to say, this is what happened to me. And I hope that whatever I can offer you around how I navigated through that can help you if you find yourself in that space. We have the power to take the worst thing that has ever happened to us and actually, like that scripture says that I shared with you guys, take it and use it for good.
Yeah. I just want to clarify that it's not that God put you in certain situations, but what he did do was equip you with what you needed to get to the place that you are right now. And so when I go back to this question of if you woke up tomorrow completely healed, who would you be? And this is what you're describing right now, is this powerful, strong woman who can, and you said some very empowering words, like, if I stand before you, thinking of something that's standing solid in front of you and sharing this, the courage and the foundation that has to be laid for someone to come from that space is so great and vast. And I'm just loving that you're being so vulnerable and open with us, because I'm feeling so many different ways right now. Like, there's parts of me that just want to run up and hug you and just give you all the love. And then there's parts that I want to cry. And then there's parts where I'm like, fuck yeah, this is, yes.
That's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like this overwhelming power in my chest that is like coming up from my stomach and just, yeah. And I think you are a very bright light in the darkness for so many abused women.
Yeah, thank you for that. I loved, Michelle, that you pointed out that it was not something that God did to me, right? Oftentimes, and I was in this space, I just want to take a few moments to touch base on that. I was in this space where I thought, because of the way I was born into the world, also a very unique thing. My dad was married when he and my mother, when I was born. So him and my mother got together, very unique story. But I was considered the bastard child of the relationship. So that was also another label that was put on me for most. The illegitimate, I'll use that one, but bastard is what I heard, right? The bastard child is what I heard growing up, but the illegitimate child of this relationship. And so I thought, because of what my parents had done, that God was punishing me and punishing them through my life. So for me, I was like, God hates me. God does not love me. If God was real, if God loved me, why would I be getting abused? Why would my parents be on drugs? Why would we be in poverty? Why would we have all of these negative, punishments? I'm just a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I sat in that space, and I wanted to share that because I think it's important to recognize that a lot of times when pain enters in, trauma enters in, challenges enter in, we think it's because of something we've done. We think it's because God is like, oh, I'm going to get you now because you've messed up so many times and this is wrong and that is wrong and you're not deserving
punishment.
Of this.
Like, we think it's punishment.
Yes, but it's not. It's not. It's the world is the way it is. People in the world are the way they are. There's an old saying that says, hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. I found out later that my abuser had been abused as a child and grew up in horrible situations and circumstances, right? Not that I was like, that's an excuse, but I had more empathy for that person. And that is a jagged pill to swallow.
Yeah.
You are on the victim end of someone's behavior to say, I can understand a little bit why this was an easy road for them to travel down. But I definitely wanted to just sit with that for a second and share that, whatever you find yourself dealing with, it is not punishment from God. Life is full of uncertainty. We all have some form of trauma that we will experience before we leave here. It is at varying degrees, but we will all have something that hurts us, something that challenges us, something that disappoints us. So I think we need to just understand that whatever that is, no matter what it is, we have what we need. We have what we need, and it's in us. And those things are the things that are used to bring it out of us.
Yes, 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 yes. When I'm thinking about speaking in a biblical way, God did give us free will, right? So even though I think sometimes when we're in situations where we're thinking, why me? Why is this happening to me? Immediately we kind of go to, how would God allow this to happen?
It's easy to go there. Yeah.
Very easy to go there. And, you and I have talked, and I've talked on this podcast many times about the death of my brother. And it's just one of the big ones that always stand out for me. But I was same thing, like, why would this happen to him? How could, and then what I felt towards the person who actually killed him wasn't intentional, but it was at the hands of somebody else. And it took a long time to think, why would God allow this to happen? And through my seeking and work, I learned that God doesn't create these bad or hurtful circumstances, but what he does give you are the tools, and those gifts are available to you, and they look different for everybody. Because even as I'm hearing you talk, I'm going, okay, to even get to that place, that's where a lot of people get stuck. How did you get to that mindset?
So for me, it was time. Time really is our friend. Looking back over my journey, I've recognized that there was something in me that every day just called me to rise.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I would rise in fear. Sometimes I would rise in pain. Sometimes I would rise in confusion. But nonetheless, every day I got up. Every day I showed up. And there became a point in my life where I began to show up for me. Now, this did not get clear until after I had gotten married and became a mom for the first time with my son. Unhealthy marriage. But I was so traumatized, and I was living in such a space of scarcity that I wanted to have what I thought looked like the ideal family. I wanted that for my son because I didn't want him to experience the brokenness that I experienced coming up. And I remember, as odd as it is, I had gotten sick. I had gotten a brain tumor. It was threatening my sight. It was right on my pituitary gland, right behind my eyes. So I had to move quickly with it. Thankfully, it was not cancerous, but it was really large in size. So it was really impacting my quality of life. So a couple things kind of snowballed. Diagnosed with a brain tumor. I know I'm going to have surgery. I have a 2-year-old son at the time. Scared that I'm going to leave him behind in a very unhealthy environment. I went to the funeral of one of our classmates in high school. And I normally don't do funerals because I don't want that to be my lasting memory of the person. But I remember going to that funeral and sitting in the sanctuary and looking at her stretched out in this box. And up to that point, I had been living life in gray. All I lived for was being a mom to my son and being everything to everybody else, but completely dying inside, not showing up for me in the way that I wanted to. I see her there. I recognize how close death is to me based on my brain tumor and everything I'm about to walk into. And sitting in that pew full of people, room full of people, it was like I was there alone. And it was me and this person that I had seen full of life, joking, living life, partying, doing all the things, now stretched out in this box. Life has left her. She's gray. She doesn't even look anything like the person I remember. And I remember sitting there with all this chatter and people around and emotion and the songs playing, and this is a final farewell for this person, and saying to myself, this could be you. And if this is going to be you, which one day it will be, because that's an appointment we will all keep. Okay. No canceling, no rescheduling. How do you want to leave here? Do you want to leave here full of life, or do you want to leave here in the state that you're in? Oddly enough, I left that funeral, walked up into the apartment I was living with my husband at the time, and I said, hey, I can't do this anymore. Well, what's this? I can't be married to you. That day I asked him for a divorce.
Wow.
And I decided that I was going to show up for me. Scared, afraid, not wanting to be a single mom, not wanting to, victimize my son or repeat any of the processes that I had to work my way through. It was that day, that moment, that I decided that I was going to dig in deep, and I was going to really start to hold hold everything that was impacting me and how I showed up in the world. So that meant going back to that 8 and 9-year-old girl and walking myself through that trauma. That meant going back and working through the resentment and borderline hatred that I held for my mother because I felt like she abandoned me when I needed her the most. I didn't know what it was to be a woman. I had no one to model that for me. So there was a whole nother bag of stuff that entered into my life because of that. Bad decision making, not valuing my body or myself, lots of mistakes. So there were all these key things that I had to go back in and sit with. And this is what I think is so important. No matter what the source of the pain is, you have to allow yourself the experience of sitting with it. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it hurts. I know it requires tears and pain. And sometimes it'll physically show up. You'll get a headache. You'll feel sick to your stomach, but you've got to hold it, because in holding it, you'll see that it's something that you can actually separate yourself from. And that goes back to me saying that we're not what we've experienced. The experience may have impacted who we ultimately become, but we are not that thing. I am not a victim. And that may sound crazy to some people because they go, this woman is nothing but a victim. She's been victimized over and over again. I don't identify with that.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. And that is a perfect segue into the thing I was going to say is every day we wake up, we have a choice and we have a chance. Every day. Every day I got up, I had the choice to sit in my pain or not. Every day I had a chance to learn and grow and do the work. Scripture just dropped into my spirit now that faith without works is dead. I can believe in God all day long, but if I'm not willing to put in the work to be in agreement with whatever God's word says that I believe by way of my faith, it does me no good. There's no benefit to it. God is going to tell me what's available to me. I have to then go after it. If healing is available to me, then I have to figure out what resource, what tool, what thing I can do to help in the process of my healing. So for me, that was counseling, that was prayer, that was sharing my story and understanding that I have the power to rise above all of it. I think to hold the truth of it being a journey is what is equally as empowering as having faith in the power outside of yourself as well as the power inwardly to take the steps on the journey. I think recognizing that you have this chance, you have this choice. That's what free will is. Mm-hmm. Free will is saying that there is so much out there, known and unknown, available to you. And even in the midst of all the uncertainty that is out there as well, you can illuminate a path that can get you from where you are to where you desire to be. And truth be told, from where I started to where I exist now was beyond what I thought the marker was. Like, if I could just get here, I'd be happy.
Right.
Right. And it's not that I'm rich. It's not that there's not things that I don't wish I had in my life. And, there's still a lot that I'm like, well, I'd love to have that, but I'm also okay if I don't, because I feel inwardly I'm okay with me.
I would like to go back to the funeral. That to me felt like such an awakening.
It was. Yeah. I think what I recognize now is most of that marriage was based on trauma. Me wanting to feel secure, me wanting to feel good enough, me wanting to be a part of something that I didn't have growing up. And I was willing to sacrifice myself to have that. I was lost during that whole marriage. I was just in gray. If you asked me, hey, what would you like to go eat for lunch? I'd be, whatever you want. I was so disconnected from myself in my attempts to go after what I thought I wanted and to maintain it, that I was
recreate that childhood you didn't have.
Right. And it's hard to recreate what you're not familiar with, right? Mm-hmm. So you just reach out and you grab what you think are the pieces to put that puzzle together. It was definitely an awakening for me because I recognized that I needed to value myself. I mattered. During that marriage, I didn't. So I had done the work to heal from some of the trauma. I was not completely healed at that point. But what happened was when I saw the opportunity of this relationship and I saw what I thought it offered, I felt like that was the Band-Aid to cover the wound. But every wound needs to have the bandage removed at some point, because if you're constantly putting the Band-Aid, then you're dealing with moisture, you're dealing with all these things that don't actually lend to the healing of that wound, right? We need to have some scabs. And what I recognized in that moment of awakening was that I had these open wounds, and 6 years in, still not healed. I'm actually in a worse state because I lost myself. So I felt like I had climbed up the hill and then rolled back down to the bottom, and I had to recognize that time is not on my side. I'm not promised tomorrow. So do I stay here and exist in this space, or do I just pull the e-brake and abandon ship and show up tomorrow to whatever tomorrow's going to be?
You weren't going to be able to get to where you needed to go with that partnership.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think this is really important that I share this piece. My abuser was an alcoholic, and I found myself married to one. The reason I say this is so important is that unknowingly sometimes, if we do not put in the work to heal, we will draw the familiar to ourselves, and we will find ourselves in a similar familiar environment. I may not be getting abused physically and molested, but I'm getting abused mentally. I'm getting abused verbally. And that was familiar to me. So I was comfortable in the chaos that I had grown up in. So I think it's really important that we understand the importance of allowing ourselves the process of healing. Because if we don't, then what we're doing by way of free will is we are making a choice, and we're taking a chance on bringing that very thing back into our life. Might be packaged differently, but it's like that lesson. You ever have people in your life where they keep going through the same thing, just different players in the game? It's because they haven't obtained the lesson from the experience.
I just heard a quote that says, "What you do not change, you choose."
It
If
is.
you don't like it, you chose it.
Yeah.
You got to do something about it.
It's where the subconscious mind comes in to play, because it is, like I said, the familiar, the known. If it was too peaceful, too calm, that might stir some things up that feel not okay, because that's not what you have essentially thrived in. You had to get to that place where that started to become familiar so that you can truly thrive. You hear it all the time. How come I keep dating the same kind of people? How come I keep going for the same jobs that I'm not happy in? All these kinds of things. And it's the subconscious mind that's driving us. And so to make that switch is huge and uncomfortable.
Yes. And someone I love very dearly, I watched them go through this over and over again. When they would get in a peaceful relationship, they were bored. It wasn't exciting or thrilling to not have cheating going on and horrible screaming, yelling, physical fights. They would just get bored. And to have a partner that was giving them gifts and treating them like a queen, they didn't know how to receive that.
It's that unknown. And then sometimes people self-sabotage that because, again, it's not what feels normal to them. So it is amazing. It's a big breakthrough to make that choice and do something different and stick with it and create something different.
Absolutely. I say this to myself often. You have to learn how to be comfortably uncomfortable.
Yes.
Anytime you're trying to change because you know it's going to serve the best version of yourself, the best version of the life you hope to have and experience, it's going to be uncomfortable. And unfortunately, a lot of us, we struggle with self-worth. We struggle with believing we're good enough to have that thing. So as we elevate closer to it, we self-sabotage. We go back, we revert to what is familiar because we know we can handle that, we can manage that, we can kind of thrive in that because that's been our experience. That speaks to the point that you made that sometimes you can be gifted with the thing that you deserve. But because there's an underlying kind of belief story that we've told ourselves that we're not deserving of that, we actually take that on as we don't want it. So we go back to what we think we want. But then when we're back there, we realize I didn't want that. I actually wanted this over here, but I've ruined it now. So I think we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Anytime you are birthing something new in your life, and it could be a way of thinking, there's going to be pain associated with that. I always equate it to like childbirth. There's this greatness in each of us. There's this ability, this gift, this talent. Who knows how long the laboring is going to be? I've had 3 kids. Each experience was completely different, right? Some I was in labor 12 hours, some 8 hours. There's a difference there, but something beautiful came out of that pain. Even though I had gone through the experience the first time with my son, when my daughter came along, the second child, I'm like, oh, I got this. I know what to expect. No, it was completely different. But I told myself that story, and I recognized that if I just kept pushing, if I kept taking in the breath, showing up, pushing out what I know is on the inside of me, eventually that child was going to make its way into the world.
Love this so
I
much.
know.
I love it so much.
It's such a great metaphor. And as you're describing that, Tenile, I was also visualizing you, because we talked about how, like, okay, you rise up every day, right? And you have that choice, you have that mindset. But sometimes that might look like tears streaming down the face, right? And like body not wanting to move. I mean, those pains, those labor pains that you're talking about, that morning could look that way. It's not just, oh, I woke up and bounced out of bed and was like, put the lipstick on, I'm good to go. It's like, this could be rolling out and falling on the floor and wailing and going, I'm not doing anything today. But then the choice is, no, yes, I am. Get the freak up. You know what I mean? Get in the shower, like do the thing. So as you're describing the birthing process, I'm also seeing this physically us and what we might go through as we're going through those pains, and then making that decision and then seeing the gift.
Yeah, I think the answer is affording yourself all of that. So if you've got to slide out of the bed onto the floor and like crawl to the bathroom or to that cup of coffee, don't deny yourself that experience, because be honest with yourself. Your power is in standing in your truth. Mm-hmm. I would love to tell you that every day I woke up and was like, yeah, it's me and God. I'm going after the world. No, it wasn't. Sometimes I'd lay in that bed with my curtains drawn and like, oh God, I'm still here.
Yeah.
You know, and I had to realize the power of sitting with that. Remember I said earlier about holding whatever you're feeling. Afford yourself. I say to myself often, grace unto thyself. Grace. What does that mean? Allow yourself, whatever God is allowing for you to experience, also allow yourself to experience that, because that's how you get to know you. That's how you get to stand a little stronger, a little taller, with your head up a little higher, because you know you had those days. You know you had those moments where it took everything in you to get out of bed, yet you did it. And we often think that we're weak. We don't have what we need to do it. I can't do this. It's impossible. I could never do that until it's done. Mm-hmm. I said to myself, I could never leave this marriage. I said to myself, I could never fully be healed. I said to myself, I could never love again. I've done all of those things. But in the moment, because I was so much in a space of avoidance, I don't want to feel no more pain. I've had enough pain for a lifetime. I don't want to sit here and have to sit with this thing, right? No, sitting with the thing is what empowered me. It's what gave me the strength to take a step closer to the love that ultimately found me, to the healing that became mine, to the increase in self-value and self-worth that I sit in now.
And I found it so powerful when you said that it allowed you to separate that pain from yourself and see it never was a part of you. It's what happened to you. I love Oprah's book, What Happened to You? I think that it's such a powerful question that we can ask ourselves and the people around us, because it was never you.
Right. We cannot afford to take it on as identity. We have to see it for what it was. It was an experience. No matter how difficult, how challenging, how traumatic, it is not who I am. Who I am is who I say I am, and who I am is who I choose to be. That choice and that chance. Every day, this is so powerful in my life, and this is something I try to remind myself of daily. Every day, I have a chance to become a better version of Tenile. I have a chance. I have an opportunity, and I have a choice to make. Will I choose to sit in my trauma, my pain, my experience, or will I take a chance on the person that I believe I can become? Every day, that is before me. And every day, I have the power and the right to choose whatever direction I want to take. Some days, in all honesty, I have allowed myself to sit in my past and feel sorry for myself.
We're human. It happens.
We're human. It happens. So the reason I'm sharing this is because you need to understand that when you find yourself in those spaces, it does not take away from the progress you've made.
Mm-hmm.
What it serves as a reminder that this is where I've been and this is where I find myself. Because sometimes we feel like when we get to a certain place, like, I'm just here. Like there's nothing more to get, out of life. I've gotten away from that. So I'm comfortable. I'm good. I'm happy with myself, but there's always more. There's always that next level. There's always that elevated state of being. So when we find ourselves in this place, it is a reminder to celebrate in gratitude for the place that we occupy on the norm. I always feel like it's God's way of hitting rewind on the tape, because a lot of times we feel like I'm not doing anything. I hear often from people like, what am I here for? I feel like I haven't accomplished anything in life. I feel like I'm not doing anything with my life. I'm just so like stagnant. I'm just like really disappointed in myself. Now I'm putting all this negativity on me. I haven't accomplished much.
We have all been there.
Yeah. In comparison to this person who's on Instagram looking like
Yes.
they're living the life and they have the
Right.
perfect house and the perfect husband. And I'm over here miserable watching Netflix and hating my life right now. The reality is those moments serve a purpose because it reminds us how far we have come.
Mm-hmm.
I love that too.
Yeah.
God hitting rewind.
Mm-hmm.
We need to remember where we've come from. And
Yeah.
gratitude is so important.
It is.
And we lose sight. It's funny. I think that's just part of our human nature. But as soon as we get to where we wanted to go, we lose sight of how hard and how much work it took to get there. And it's so easy just to become ungrateful
Yeah.
and unappreciative.
One of the things that we do that I think is really detrimental to us, especially women, is we do not give ourselves credit. Okay. So I think about me, I think about you and your story that you've shared with your brother. You have to bank that in your account of strength, right? You experienced great loss that wounded you to the depths of your soul. It would change your life and everything about it moving forward. But it's like a bank account. You're completely depleted in that moment. You're in the red, negative, overdrawn. But every day that you rise up, even in tears, even in pain, even with uncertainty, it's a deposit in your strength bank, right?
Yep.
Oftentimes we do the thing, but we don't give ourselves the recognition of doing the thing. So when we show up at, let's say, the base of another mountain in our life, we don't recognize that, oh, I've got the power to do that. 365 days. I woke up when I was hurting, when I found myself in the darkest of spaces. That was a credit. I'm not in the red. So this mountain doesn't seem as tall, right? Because I realized I'm not overdrawn. I'm not overspent. I actually made it through that terrible marriage. I made it through that abuse. I made it through my parents' addiction. The problem is we get stuck in the story, the
Yes.
experience, and we don't credit ourselves for the stuff that we've done, which is why we often feel weak and we lack confidence and we lack self-value and self-worth. That's where that came from. The confidence you guys see, the whatever you see in me that is good, came from me sitting back and doing the tally.
Mm-hmm.
I could have killed myself. I attempted it.
Mm-hmm.
I tried it. I got
Many
to a point
do.
where it was too much. I felt abandoned. I felt like all life had to offer me was just pain. And I had a plan, mapped it out, was living with my best friend of 30 plus years now. Roommates. She left to work on BART to San Francisco, had been gone well on the train. Nobody was coming back. I set everything up. I was going to kill myself. Okay. This is before my children. I remember putting my back against the wall and saying, God, if you don't want me to leave this earth, then you need to send like a sign. And it chokes me up talking about it because I was this close to and calling it a day. Now, mind you, my roommate was gone. She was on BART. She didn't have a car. She had been gone maybe 30, 45 minutes. I have stuff in my hand. I'm ready to go. I got the bathtub full. I'm ready to end it. There's no possible way that a person without a vehicle on the BART could have made it back in the time that she did. I'm getting ready to, and she comes around the corner, like running. What are you doing?
Whoa.
And that was the sign. But it was at that last moment of where I was ready to be out of here. You understand? Where God said, no, because even though you may be feeling that, you have to recognize, Tenile, that you've overcome so much. Your life still has a purpose, even in those low moments. So God just stepped in. That was my midnight hour. We sing this song in church. It says, late in the midnight hour, God's going to turn it around and it's going to work in your favor. My life was completely changed after that moment, reaching that breaking point and being in that space of like, I'm done, to where God did the impossible and sent in what would stop me from making the worst decision of my life is mind blowing to me.
It is mind blowing. And what is also mind blowing to me is that you called upon him at that last second. And I think we forget sometimes we can call upon God, our faith. We can ask for help, whatever that looks like, whether it's to a friend. In this case, for you, it was God. And then here comes your friend. That is super powerful to me because something in you was like, you weren't ready yet. You definitely weren't ready to leave this planet. You weren't.
That's a wonderful reminder to all of us that you can always ask for help. I mean, I just had that happen recently and I was upset about something and I was in my car and I went, oh yeah, I can pray right now in my car while I'm driving. And so many people can rely on that. I just think you clearly were not done. You had many people to help and to share your story is providing, just even in this episode, not even talking about the ministry work that you do, but I know that so many elements of this story are going to hit for so many women in different points of their life that they will never be the same after hearing your journey. And I'm just wondering, like, when's the book coming out? Like, I need a book.
Can we get a copy immediately?
That is so funny you guys said that because I actually have been working on one, not a long read, but actually like to the meat of what I feel would be impactful. Some key points, and this is what you can do. These are some things you can try. All things that I've applied on my own journey. I'm actually working on that. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted.
So as you guys were talking and we were talking about the rewind button and all that, journaling is so powerful. And I think those are tools that you can use also to understand and go back to, wow, I was here, but now I'm here. Gratitude journal in itself, just to constantly put those thoughts into your head. Writing accomplishments.
When you don't feel like it, which
Correct.
I've been in a little slump the last few days where I'm like, I don't feel like it.
But you just
That's when you do it.
do it. And then you realize, like, I got past that. I got through that. And for you, putting out a book, all of these tools, the ministry work that you're doing, I think all of that helps for the healing of your soul, but also the collective healing of all women who suffer.
He's a messenger.
You're a messenger. And I'm having a moment right now feeling really emotional because you're one person, but like the ocean that they say, like the ripples, the vibrations that go out. This is not just your suffering journey. This is the suffering journey of your mother, of the abuser, of other women who are being touched by this. That is the power of sharing. Yeah. That is the power of going back to the way it was. We always go back to this tribe mentality where people would sit around and share stories because there is so much healing that happens.
Absolutely.
Oh, Tenile.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You were talking and what came to me was, I'm a huge fan of the first book of the Bible in Genesis, right? The book of origin. I feel like the whole Bible is found in that one chapter. And I think about when God was creating everything, how he created from nothingness, darkness. A lot of us don't recognize it, but it's in our darkness that God creates who we were intended to be when he thought about us. And I thought about when you were talking, Michelle, how it says that it is not good that man would be alone. And we often think that's joining a husband to a wife. That's true. It's beautiful. Marriage is a beautiful thing. But it's also just the individual person. We get in this space where we think we can desperado life, right? We can get Lone Ranger it and we can get out there.
Society tells us
yes.
strength and makes a successful person.
But we are tribal people. And I think a lot of us take experiences we've had with women. There's a lot of cattiness, jealousy, different things that happen with women when you put us all together. But that's because we haven't done the work on ourselves. But when you start healing and you start releasing some of the limited mindsets you've had and some of the stories you've told yourself, you can see the beauty in tribe. We all need someone. We need to connect. We need to be able to be transparent and be in the fullness of who we are and be loved for that. Not competed against, not talked about, not mistreated. There's a scripture in Jeremiah 29:11. It says that basically, I knew you before I ever formed you in the womb of the woman that you would come to life through. And I know the plans I have for you, and they're plans for you to prosper, right? And it's like God knows the number of hairs on our head. He set back. He didn't just go, what do I have over here? This height, this hair, these eyes, let's throw it in a pot and see what we get. No, like God sat there and pondered, what will Michelle's smile look like? How will she think? What will set her off? What will make her cry? God knows us so intimately.
It's all on
right?
purpose.
All on purpose, for a purpose. And so that's what I tell myself is that, when I get to cross paths with people, whether I share my story or not, it could be a smile in a coffee shop, it could be a hello, whatever it is, that's a blessing because it's a point of connectivity. Mm-hmm. God allowed our paths to cross. My life is better. My life is going to be even greater because I spent this time with you guys today. Why? Because even though I'm doing a lot of the talking, you guys are still depositing something in my life. You're still having an impact on my life. Now, when I go and make an impact on someone else's life, that can be accredited to the time we shared with one another. So I just want to stress that point of community and needing that tribe. It may only be 1 or 2 people. It may be 10 people, but having that, it will help you stay grounded and it will help empower you and fuel you into that next best version of self.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, and I'm thinking of that moment of you in, the apartment by yourself and your friend came in, that was one person, right? That was one person that showed up and completely changed the trajectory of your whole existence, really.
Saved 4 lives, mine and the 3 children I would give birth to.
Yep.
And not to mention all the people's lives that you're touching right now. I just have to keep going back to that because I just think you have a tremendous power that is shining light for so many that are lost in the darkness. And we do live in this society right now that is so isolated and alone. Yeah. And so that's a big part of our calling is to get these messages out there. I know that you are having a huge impact on our listeners and their lives are being changed. And you may be saving someone that right now is in the depths of despair and happened to listen to our podcast today. And you're such a bright light. Thank you so much for sharing a very brave, difficult story.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. If I could, I would like to speak to maybe a listener who finds herself or himself in that space. Everything feels super heavy right now. And maybe you've given your best shot and it didn't pan out the way you had hoped it would, but just hang on. Just give yourself that grace to feel what you're feeling, but know that you do have everything that you need inside of you to meet tomorrow. And if God says the same and you have the breath of life in you and you're able to open those 2 eyes, step into whatever your tomorrow is going to be. Because in doing so, it's like working out at a gym, right? When you first start, you can maybe only get that 5-pounder, but consistency, having grace to show up each day, no matter how that looks, is going to empower you to see a little more clearer. Because a lot of times our pain blinds us. It keeps us from seeing what God has right within our reach. For me, even going back to that moment where I contemplated suicide, I think about what was just on the other side of that experience. It was such a blessing. It was so freeing. It was my healing. It was my deliverance. It was my ability to step into my power, to own my story, to not live in the shame or the hurt or the pain of anything that had been my experience up to that point, but to recognize, to credit my account for everything that I may have had to crawl my way through, cry my way through, scream my way through. But nonetheless, I got through it. And I found myself right within the reach of my breakthrough. So I definitely want to make sure that If you find yourself in that darkness, the light really is right there. The Bible says joy comes in the morning. So you just got to hang on.